You're probably hearing a lot about the housing market right now and the change in home prices. Watch this video and I'm going to talk to you about the interest rates that are changing, how inflation affects it, and of course, are we going into a recession? All right, so like I said, today we're going to talk about the housing market in general and talk about those home prices and also how the interest rates and inflation is really having a big impact on the housing market right now. But before we get started, my name is Rob Schou and I'm with EXP Realty in Southern Maryland. If this is your first time on the channel, go ahead and use that contact information below. If you have any questions or need any help about moving to Southern Maryland, call me, text me, whatever you want, and I'd be happy to help you make those decisions. You can also scroll down to the first comment, click on that link, and it will schedule a Zoom meeting one-on-one between us, and we can talk about your home buying needs. Last but not least, and you haven't yet, if you want just like general information about the housing market as a whole, but also some specific information about what it's like to live in Southern Maryland, make sure you click the subscribe button and click the little bell so you're notified every single time we put out new content. All right, so let's go and get started. We're going to talk about inflation, the rising rates that we're seeing, the rising mortgage rates, how that's affecting home prices, and also, are we going towards a recession? All right, so let's go and get started. It's no news to anyone right now, I feel like, that inflation is one of the top stories in the news all the time. All we hear about right now is inflation, 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 and inflation is something that is part of every day of our lives. So one of the biggest things that we're seeing inflation on, of course, is gas prices and food prices, but also this rise in home prices and cost of living are definitely having an impact, a huge impact on the way people can kind of afford to live. And we're starting to really see it affect the housing market. 1981 was the last time we've seen inflation this high, where we've seen inflation go this high. So that's 41 years ago from the time of this filming. Now, why do I start talking about inflation in a home market video or housing market video? It's because it's directly linked to why mortgage prices are going up, why mortgage interest rates are going up. So follow me here. Inflation is a key metric of our economy, and the Federal Reserve is kind of tasked with making sure inflation stays below a certain percent. Now, their goal is about 2%. Right now, we are way over that. And they have different tools to help bring that inflation down, and one of them is to raise rates. Now, a few days ago, what happened was they were expected to raise it about 50 basis points at this next meeting, which was actually yesterday, June 15th, 2022. But word got out before the meeting that they were going to raise it possibly 75 basis points, and the market freaked out. So what happened was the market freaked out and interest rates spiked to 6.25%. That is off of lows back around this time last year that were 3%. So more than doubled mortgage interest rates. You know, that's a hard pill to swallow, especially since it's someone that maybe was looking at a house last year that couldn't get the house they wanted, that said, I'm just going to wait. And now they're in this market where prices are still high, and we'll get to prices in a second, where prices are still high, but these interest rates are even higher. Now, what I'll say is the whole point of this, though, is we're going to fight inflation with these interest rates. So it's kind of part of the plan. So hopefully by fighting inflation with the higher interest rates, we're going to see prices start to come down. Now, why would prices start to come down? Because obviously demand is going to go down. The more it costs to borrow money, the more it costs for people to, pay for things, and the less likely they are to buy it. And so we're going to see demand start to go down and meet that supply. Now, if you watch any of my other housing market videos, going into the second thing here, it probably sounds really familiar. I talk a lot about supply and demand. What they're trying to do is kind of put their finger on the demand side and kind of tamp it down so the supply can catch up. Right now in the housing market, we are still at a point where we still have a shortage of houses and a surplus of buyers. And what the Fed is really trying to do by raising these interest rates is kind of kick some of those buyers out of the market so the supply can meet the demand. And hopefully what we're going to start seeing for those people that are still able to afford houses, and I'll get to that in a second too, but for those people that are still able to afford houses, we're starting to see home prices drop. Now, It's normally the stronger buyers with a healthy budget that are still able to buy in this market. But I think as this market goes on and we see demand continue to drop and supply to respond by us having more supply on there and prices also dropping, we're going to start seeing it open back up to those buyers that maybe are priced out of areas they want to be in right now. So, I mean, for me, like, I get it. I hear a lot of people, I have a lot of clients that are really upset about, inflation, one, two, the current mortgage rates, and three, their ability to not buy one of these expensive houses. What I say to them 100% is, I get the desires to get out there and just buy whatever, or just get there and just do whatever you possibly can to get into a home because you don't know what's going to happen next. And I agree, you don't. But the whole point of what the Fed's doing right now is exactly what we're seeing. They're raising interest rates to hopefully lower that inflation and hopefully stabilize or drop home prices as well. Does it work? Does that happen? Does it make more sense for someone with a lower budget, or maybe like a tighter budget with their income, to wait a little bit before they make that decision to jump into the market? Possibly. What I always say, you can't base your decisions solely on the dollars and solely on, the mortgage and stuff like that. You got to find the right house for you. And if that means jumping in right now and getting it, you should do that. If that means you got to wait a little longer, I don't think there's going to be too much, downside to waiting a little bit more and hoping inflation will respond to these actions by the Fed, and also that home prices, like we're starting to see already, really start to go down a little bit more. Now, I don't think it's going to be a 2008 crash. I don't think it's going to be, all these people are going to have all these houses foreclosed upon and stuff like that, because it's a totally different housing market than we had in 2008. Now, in 2008, we had a ton of houses and not a lot of buyers. And so when the market crashed, and the recession in 2008 had a lot to do with the housing market, when that happened, it just threw everything into a tailspin. And with that much supply and not a lot of demand, of course those prices are going to tank. I don't see the same thing right now. And like I've said in previous videos, barring, some catastrophe or something like that, I don't see it happening again, because the demand is still strong and we just don't have as many houses that are being started. And based on some other data that's coming out, like, builder confidence and things like that, new builders are not building as many houses because they're not sure consumers are going to be buying. All right, so I mentioned 2008, and this kind of brings me to the last point, is about a recession. I hear it thrown around all the time. I'm a big fan of different, podcasts, listen to Bigger Pockets and just all these different housing podcasts and all these different, Mortgage News Daily and CNBC, and the word recession gets thrown around a lot. Since a lot of us went through the 2008 recession, it's a scary word, and it's a word that kind of, puts us on pause, especially when it comes to the housing market. Now, a recession, just to be clear, is just 2 straight down months or decreasing GDP. When you say it that way, it doesn't sound as scary. Now, 2008 was an especially bad recession, and it took us a while to get out of. In 2008, it really started in the housing market due to poor lending practices and rippled throughout the economy. Those lending practices that were in place in 2008 have really been kind of shored up, and there's a lot of safeguards in place that I don't see that happening now. I think it's going to be a recession that kind of centers outside of the housing market and does have a ripple effect into it, but not nearly as big as the 2008 recession had impact that it did on the housing market. It's still up for debate whether there is going to be a recession or not. But I wouldn't focus on that as much as I would focus on, if you're really concerned about mortgage rates and home prices, just keep watching inflation. If you start seeing that headline inflation starts decreasing, start expecting that what the Fed has decided to do is correct, and rates should start to stabilize. I see a lot of people talking about maybe, going up to, I hear a lot of people, actually, not people talking. I've heard a lot of people of my clients and people on Facebook saying, well, we're at 6.25 now. It's on its way up to 10. That is not a guarantee. Yes, the Fed's plan to hike rates throughout the next year, but that does not mean it's definitely going to be at 10%. I have no crystal ball. I think at some point, they'll see inflation start kind of leveling off, and they'll decide, hey, you know what? It's time to kind of pull back a little bit, and the market will be happy with where they are, and we should see those rates kind of stabilize. If you're looking on the Southern Maryland level, we're definitely seeing these factors have an impact. I've seen more and more houses with price decreases. I've had less buyers reach out to me either through YouTube or either through my Google ads and just in general. And I've heard a lot of people, a lot of clients and a lot of future clients just have that, uncertainty to their voice when they're talking about the housing market. So it's having a big impact. But like everything else in the housing market, we kind of get data, from before. So we're going to start seeing that impact and see what it really means for prices and that kind of stuff and days on market. Probably in July is when we're really going to get a good picture of what this kind of stuff is doing. But anecdotally, there are definitely more price decreases. There's definitely more inventory. So it's starting to balance out. Now, that being said, there are still houses in prime neighborhoods in Southern Maryland, especially around St. Mary's County and in Charles County and in Calvert County too, that are going under contract within a few days with multiple offers. Those houses before probably would have got 10 to 15 offers. Now they're getting 3 to 5 offers. But also there are definitely houses, and a few of them watching for waterfront clients that I'm helping out right now. There are a few houses that normally would have gone in 5 to 10 days that have been sitting for 20 or 30 days. So there's definitely a shift in the market, and I'm curious to see what the data kind of shows up and shows us at the end of June here. So I'm excited to share that with you too. But there's definitely a balancing of the market going on. Just how big of a balance it is, I can't speak to it just yet, but I know that it's going to be interesting to see those numbers at the end of this month. All right, so hopefully this information was helpful. If you have any questions or need any help, make sure you reach out to me using that contact information below. I'd be happy to help you. You can also scroll down to the first comment, click on the link that's in there, and it will schedule a Zoom meeting one-on-one with me, and we can talk about your home buying needs. Last but not least, if you haven't yet, make sure you click the subscribe button, click the little bell so you're notified every single time we put out new content. Hope to see you on the next video.